Join us for another exciting episode at the home of spine-tingling research, the Knowledge Hub. Welcome to this episode of the Knowledge Hub, the podcast dedicated to bringing spine-tingling research out of the ivory tower and making it visible and accessible not only to fellow academics but also to the broader public. We aim to bridge the gap between research on the one side and real-world impact by drawing academics into conversations in the marketplace and society. And today we have the opportunity to speak to Pieter Geldenhuys, a futurist and a technology expert talking about the future. Welcome, Pieter.
Thank you for the opportunity. I can't wait to share some wonderful ideas with all of you.
Well, you are known as a tour guide to the future. So what does that entail?
Well, one of the important things we need to realize is that the future hasn't been set. There are wonderful opportunities, new pathways to explore. And when we look at the future, we like to approach it through three lenses. Firstly, we'd like to explore the future. And these are the major megatrends which will shape our world. As the famous author William Gibson said, the future already happened. It is just unequally distributed. But it means that there are these equally distributed trends that we need to pay attention to. And these are the major trends which will shape our world in decades ahead. That's the first part of our journey. Explore where the world is heading and what are the new opportunities that will emerge within this changing world. Secondly, we take a look at harnessing or unlocking the opportunities of the future. These are the new technology developments, new business models, and how can we then use these technologies to change or shape the future? It's a far more proactive stance than looking back and seeing how the future unfolds, but being an active participant in changing and shaping the future. And lastly, when we interact with a complex world, we need to use a complex adaptive ontology, and that is where we talk about navigating the future. In a world of uncertainty where your actions can't be predictable, so you take an action but you can't predict the outcome. So the cause and effect relationships isn't predictable and repeatable like in the world of physics. In these domains, the cause and effect relationship is only visible in retrospect and rarely repeats. So you need a completely different approach in order to test these technologies in the marketplace to see where they get traction or not. So those three lenses, understanding where the future is heading, and that's the part of being a tour guide to the future. And then the second and third parts is how do you influence the future by using technology? And that's it in brief.
Well, that sounds quite difficult to do and very complex. Now, what do you need to be able to do this? What kind of background and academic preparation do you need for this?
So I've got a unique background. I'm an electronic engineer by training, and then I did an MBA specializing in technology strategy. My PhD thesis is on complex adaptive systems, so it's diverse fields. And in the beginning, I purely focused on technology strategy, and specifically the exponential growth of technologies and how it changes the balance between scarcity and abundances. That was my first approach. And then I realized, but you can't look at technology in isolation. You need to look at all of the major forces that shape our future world. And this takes you into the world of demographics, economic regimes, geopolitics, societal change, generational change, the impact of environmental change, policies. What are all the major forces shaping our world and understanding where these forces are heading? Then integrating technology into that ecosystem, we can get a far more accurate perspective about what is possible and what isn't.
So you were in academia, but also in the corporate world. How did you move into that area of your...
It was interesting. I was an MBA lecturer for approximately 12, 13 odd years on a full-time basis. And then at a certain point in time, all happening in 1 year, I think it was 2003, where I critiqued some students on a corporate education program, and the CEO of one of the cellular companies were there and then invited me to join the company as a strategic advisor on a full-time basis. So that kind of paid, that kind of ended my academic career on a full-time basis. But at the same time, the environment around me also reached out to other technology companies, and they requested deeper insights into how technology changes business models in a world of abundance and scarcity and within the changes from a technological paradigm. So I started the Institute of Technology Strategy and Innovation. We've got a faculty of about 20 staff, And this is purely aimed at corporate research and corporate training in the world of technology strategy. And all of that happened in a year. So I became a strategy advisor, and we started the Institute in 2003.
All right, let's talk about the future studies itself. Now, what is future studies exactly, and how do you do it?
So the important thing is we don't predict the future, not at all. It's all about understanding what's happening today, looking at the past, looking at the trends which is shaping our world. And in a variety of aspects, we see different trends all interacting with each other. We're seeing demographic trends. In parts of the world, an explosion, in other parts of the world, a decline. Then we're seeing changes in societal structures, cyclical changes that we see in generational theory, and how that then impacts politics and economic theory. All of these trends interact with each other. And then on the other end of the scale, we've got this exponential growth in some technologies, which fundamentally changes the balance between the demand and supply cycles. So all of these trends gives you an idea of what's happening, and understanding these changes, we can then make certain predictions around the outcome of these trends. It's very important to understand that a futurist can't predict the future. We look at the underlying trends, identifying them, figuring out what they are, when they change course, and even more important, when they collide, and what will be the implications of this. Within these scenarios, we then open up wonderful opportunities for businesses to create value using new technologies. So it's an integrative approach in understanding the major trends shaping the future, but also understanding what the opportunities are that companies can leverage.
So it seems to me to be a futurist or interested in this field, you have to be a historiographer. You need to understand history.
You need to understand economics, you need to understand demographics, you need to understand generational theory, you need to understand technology and technology trends and the impact it has on our business world. So it's not only focusing on one aspect, it's a focus on a variety of fields and having a relative depth in all of them to understand its impact on the years ahead.
Now you also say it's not about predicting, but kind of shaping the future. How do you do that?
That's a very proactive approach. A lot of futurists would stand back and say, well, we can predict the major trends, and this is where the future might be heading. Because of my training as an engineer, I'd like to play a proactive part in shaping the future, and that's where a lot of our consulting goes into literally looking at the opportunities that are emerging, and what can you do utilizing the current technologies and new emerging technologies to shape the future.
Well, you are also sometimes referred to as making a controversial prediction. So what is that all about?
Well, it's a very interesting story. There's a famous futurist at the University of Hawaii, Jim Data, and he's got the second law of futures, where he says that any useful prediction of the future should appear to be ridiculous. When they asked him what's the first law of futures, he said there isn't any. Everyone is talking about the second law of thermodynamics, but no one actually refers to it. So his second law of futures is saying, create a statement that is profound so that people talk about it, think about it. If we talk about the linear predictions of the future, saying, you know, Africa's population will explode and the European population will decline and we will be on Mars one day, these are boring predictions, not in terms of its magnitude, but in terms of the conversation that it elicits. But by linking all of these trends together and making profound statements that deviate from what we think is sane would open up a debate. And that unlocks a deeper insight into what is possible or what is not. Let me give you an example. One of the predictions I'm making, or the questions I'm asking is, do we need a 5G chicken sniffer? And then people would say, what do you mean? And normally when I ask the question in an audience, no one would actually agree that a 5G chicken sniffer is a good idea. But then we take it a step further. So your access cards that you use to get into your building, how does that access card work? Do you still use the first generation access card? We have to replace the batteries every 5 years, and then people look at you all funny and say, well, my access card doesn't have a battery. And my question is, but how does it work then? How does your access card communicate with a reader? Well, it utilizes our high frequency signal that creates an electrical charge within a coil. You give that energy to a capacitor, and that speaks back to the reader. So you get your energy on the card coming from the reader. But what if you could extend that range to 2 or 3 meters? And this is what 5G millimeter waves can do. And that means you can manufacture a specific chip that you can embed into food packaging, that you can put within display shelves, and that would then energize the chip to look at the odor of that specific meat product. So you get a specific chip for chicken, and a specific chip for salmon, and a specific chip for beef. And when there's a slight change in the odor, the chip can pick it up and then tell you to then make or to change the price on the produce before it goes off. So that means it's a huge impact on food wastage. Yes, so do we need a 5G chicken sniff? Of course we do, because it'll have a huge beneficial impact on it. But by stating it in a non-obvious way, it elicits a different response from the audience. They remember the narrative and the story, and it opens up a deeper discussion. And that's literally where we want to take everyone, to make these profound statements that on the surface looks completely ridiculous. But when you dig behind the scenes, you realize that it unlocks brand new opportunities.
Now, are there some other examples that you can mention about this predictions?
Oh, well, I've got an entire book of predictions. We made about 50 predictions of the future, and I can share some of them with you. So very, very interesting, yes, headlines from the future. But what's fascinating is that some of them are truly profound. So one of the predictions we're making is that Thailand or Singapore is terrified that Thailand may split in two. Now we have got the Malacca Straits, very, very important choke point for traffic or energy as well as food that transits that passage all the way to China. And what is opening up is a possibility of Thailand opening up a new canal through Thailand itself, which can cut shipment between the Middle East and China by 4 days. Or alternatively, some of the advice we gave to large energy corporates is to open up a refinery plant on the west coast of Thailand with a pipeline going to the east coast, and then suddenly you can create a 20, 30-year contract in supplying refined fuel to China while still cutting that delivery time. So these are strategic opportunities that are opening up. We are seeing massive strategic opportunities opening up in the Arctic with global warming. The passageways and the seaways can open up new opportunities where the critical choke points that we have at Bab el-Mandab and the Malacca Straits can be negated based on new movement. So from a geopolitical perspective, massive changes are emerging. So when we make these profound statements, there's a deep insight around what's happening in the world around us and what are the opportunities you can unlock.
So it's about needs and then possibilities and then shaping the future.
Correct.
Now you also talk about frameworks and mental models because there are limitations in a predictive mindset. What do you mean by frameworks and mental models?
There's multiple models we utilize, but sometimes going back to the basics, the primary drivers, not the solutions we created over time and building on those infrastructure, but going back to the prime principles that define specific industries. That's really important. But some of the mental models can be as simple as a world of changing abundances and scarcities. Now we all know that if we have something in abundance, we waste it. And if it's scarce, we then conserve and use it sparingly. And there's a classical example that we've seen in the last 20, 30 odd years. In a previous era, which the younger generation wouldn't know, we had a scarcity on processing power, a scarcity on storage space, a scarcity on bandwidth. And what happened is that those trends, we saw a doubling of those capabilities every 9 months and sometimes every 16 months. On bandwidth, a doubling every 9 months. On processing power, doubling every 18 months. And what happened is that it completely reshaped industries. Let's look at the media industry, for example. We knew as far back as the year 2000 that television would die because then bandwidth was scarce, but in a world of abundant bandwidth, you'll be able to stream whatever movie you want. And what will that mean? A unique impact on advertising. So the advertising industry would change. Advertising will now have to be embedded in the content. So when everyone is making a YouTube video, we're stopping this broadcast to give you a quick insight into the product we're promoting. And that we knew would happen. We also knew that sport would be the only thing that people would watch live. So we also knew that by investing in sport and sport production companies, you would have the crown jewels. And that's why sports stars are getting paid billions. I think Ronaldo is now the latest billionaire. Why? because sport is the only thing that people watch live, giving you the ability to utilize that as an advertising conduit. So we knew that way back in 2000, but we realized that in a world of abundances and scarcities, this will change far more than just underlying technology. It'll change business models, industries, and so forth. Now, in an era of AI, we're asking the same question. What will be in abundance by 2035, and what will be the scarcities? And that will reshape the competitive environment once again.
Talking about AI, you mentioned the Sinefin framework. What does that actually mean?
It's pronounced the Knowledge framework. It was created by a very, very unique genius by the name of Dave Snowden. Controversial nonetheless. He calls himself a constructive irritant. But very important, he gave us an insight into a framework that helps us to navigate a world of complexity. So in a world where you can't predict the outcome of your actions, this becomes very important. I'll give you an example. If I let this go, what will happen to it?
It will fall.
Oh, well done. The cause and effect is the cause and effect is predictable and repeatable. And if I do it again, you'll get the same result. But in a complex world of human interactions, those repetitive patterns really repeats. A very good example is what happened in Africa with the launch of the M-Pesa payment system in Kenya. And there was a unique circumstance where there were a shutdown of the banks and a wonderful opportunity to then have an alternative methodology to be adopted within the Kenyan environment. And we knew for years that people in Kenya would do mobile payments well in advance of the rest of the world. And they said, oh, that's interesting. Here's a case study of a adoption of a digital technology within a developing economy. Let's go and use the exact same principles and the exact marketing team, and we launch it into another country, and it was a complete failure. Why? Because it's a complex environment. The cause and effect relationship isn't predictable and repeatable. There's dynamic forces, there are attractors, fitness landscapes that are different. So you need to approach this from a complex adaptive perspective. And here, the learning pathway isn't the world of physics, but the world of virology, evolutionary biology, anthropology. That becomes the foundation of a framework that helps us to better understand the introduction of new technology within the marketplace. So that's very important, that we need to realize that you need a completely different perspective in a world of complexity. And that's what the Knowledge framework is actually quite good at. It's not a categorization framework, but a sense-making framework, and it guides you in terms of thinking about the future in a different way and navigating it in a unique ecosystem.
Well, you talked about trends that are emerging and sometimes colliding, and you've identified 9 megatrends in this. What are they, and how do they interact and collide, and so on?
Well, let's quickly run through them. We're seeing a massive explosion in Africa over the next couple of decades, from about 1.2 billion people to 3.6 billion people, while at the same time we're seeing a dramatic decline in the population growth of other countries. Not only a slowdown in the birth rate, but literally a decline in the population. We're seeing it in small countries like Mauritius, in China, in South Korea, in the entire Europe. The estimation is that China would, if it continues its current trend, will only be about half its current size by 2100. So will it be the same in Japan and South Korea. The other key problem is that a number of these countries have leveraged their economy by borrowing money. China, 300% debt to GDP. China, this very, very high figures as well, if you look at the impact of state-owned enterprises. And the challenge is that you need a youthful young population that will pay the taxes to pay off this debt that the previous generation incurred. And those individuals aren't being born. And they haven't been born for some period of time, specifically in Europe. Now, the impact of this could be felt straight away. Most people say, but the impact will only be felt 2-3 decades from now. Not true. You see, there's changing patterns in our consumption. When you're young, between the ages of 25 and 55, you still have kids at home. No, they don't become productive like in a rural environment at 12. They only become productive at age 27. That's when kids hopefully become productive. but that means that you get smaller families. This also then means that there's a different view of consumption. And if you have children, you don't have a choice. You consume. But the moment you hit 55, now in a world where people are becoming older, they don't know how much money they will need to retire. So a lot of people retire at a later stage, but a lot of them stop spending at 55 and they're putting the money away. That actually takes money out of the economy. So your national income is then changed because my salary normally becomes and my expenditure becomes the salary of someone else. That normally happens when there's a cycle of expenditure. But when people then grow older and they stop buying things, they don't buy new cars, they don't buy new refrigerators and TVs because they save the money for their retirement. That means the money is extracted from the economy. That has a huge impact because at that point in time, we then see declining consumption, and that has a huge impact on industries. So we're already seeing this playing out in Europe. Look at the number of car companies closing down in Europe. Look at toy companies closing down because the amount of kids that could afford expensive toys aren't being born. On the other end of the scale, the devaluation of your currency due to government debt also makes the purchasing power of your currency far less. People can't afford to buy a house anymore, and when you can't afford to buy a house, you don't have children. So there's this vicious doom loop regarding government debt, more government expenditure, declining population, and the impact it has on our economy. So all of these things are integrated. There's no single trend that stands on its own. These are economic regimes, geopolitical plays. As people grow older, they also vote more conservative. We're seeing a split in social trends. We're seeing the middle ground is making way to more polarized politics. We see that in the United States, in Britain, in France, where the center-right, center-left disappears, and you get a radicalization of your political discourse. This has an impact on immigration policies. So all of these are integrated. And once you understand the trends, and when these trends collide, they lead to very, very strange implications. Let me give you an example. America is on a journey of America for America first, and although it does have international commitments, it's selective. It's no longer Bretton Woods, where the world is a free trade area and everyone uses free trade to drive global productivity. Now it's changing, and for the United States, it's a different concept because the United States, the exposure to physical imports and exports is about 13% of their economy. And if you remove Canada and Mexico from the equation, it drops to 5%. So how many things are still being made physically in the USA? Most of the money they make is from virtual products. We're talking about software, movies and music, payment services, antivirus software, and the rest. So for America, they are blessed with a geography where no one can really invade them easily, two big oceans on either side. They've got this wonderful productive system within the USA of river systems that can float things 9 times cheaper than what it is to put it on a train. That is, if you have a train track. And then they are energy secure. So in the past, they had to bring in a lot of energy from the Middle East through fracking. They are energy secure for the current state of affairs. And this means that move towards well, we still have a demography that is growing, and the world wants to trade with us. And therefore, if you want to trade with us, you either better make it inside America itself, or you're going to pay a tariff. So that's the play that is being rolled out under politics. So from a political perspective, we are seeing a fundamental shape of shift in world affairs. So all of these trends interact with each other, and that has an impact on how it plays out in politics, but also in economic regimes. So let's take this argument further. There's debate around the end of Bretton Woods. What does that mean? So with the end of Bretton Woods, that might also have an impact on America's role in NATO. And a number of people in America, and this is where the Democrats and the Republicans agree, they want America to lessen its role in the rest of the world, specifically from a military perspective. But the deal behind NATO and Bretton Woods was that America would provide the security umbrella and everyone would then buy in the euro dollar or international dollar payment methodology. The challenge is this, that if America removes the security umbrella from Europe, suddenly Europe becomes vulnerable to a threat from Russia. And this means that countries like Poland and Germany might build nuclear weapons in a matter of months. So we might see a nuclear Europe emerging in years ahead. The flip side of the scale would be an implosion of the Russian Republic, and most of the Russian republics breaking out when Putin would die one day. There might be a situation where there's a power grab, there's conflict, and normally in that critical period of change, specifically in authoritarian regimes, we see a breakup and the center can't hold anymore. Now suddenly you have a bunch of republics going independent, and all of them will have nuclear weapons. And if you go to them and say, well, please give us your nuclear weapons, we're going to give you a security guarantee underwritten by all the major powers in the world, they'll say, oh, it's the same security guarantee you gave to Ukraine. The guys would say, yeah, the same one. They say, well, no, in that case, we'd rather keep our nuclear weapons. In that case, with little republics like Chechnya having 30 or 40 nukes, then it's not strange to see the entire Middle East going nuclear. So these are some of the projections that may appear. We don't know if it will play out, but these are scenarios that you have to take seriously. For the rest of the world, this means distribute your energy reliance. Make sure that you have energy coming from other sources other than the Middle East, for example. This is strategic implications or strategic choices you make to prepare yourself for a more dangerous and dynamically changing world. So when you talk about mega trends, these are how the major mega trends influence each other, how they impact policies, economic regimes, geopolitical positioning for the future. And that's the role of a futurist. Not to predict what the future will do, but to say, in the event of these occurrences happening, how do you react today in order to create a more resilient environment for your country or for your business in a changing world?
Well, that sounds like quite a complex but much more nuanced way, because how I experience the, say, political debate and societal debate these days, it's much more about, okay, I don't like this person or this president or this grouping, and they irritate me, and that's how I decide what I'm going to do and think. But in your way of thinking, it is much, much more complex and nuanced, and you have to take all of this into account when you actually decide what you are going to think, who you are going to support, what you are going to react to, and who you are going to write letters about.
So what's important is that all the news events are but mere surface ripples of far deeper ocean currents. And identifying which of these news events are influencing these ocean currents, and even more important, when they change course, that becomes critical. Let me give you an example. I think one of the most profound news events I picked up in 2024 was 6 countries going to the moon. That's critical. Now that tells us helium-3 mining on the moon, nuclear fusion becoming critical, the moon race is back on. But those events were kind of hidden under the headlines. One of the more profound statements this year was the Genius Act in America. Critical. And yet everyone is chasing the headlines while the real changes is profoundly changing our economic environment. Let me give you an example. Your 10-year government bond was seen by the investment community as the gold standard. Yes, it was called the gold standard. So all type of investment decisions were rated against the 10-year government bond because that would be the utmost risk-free investment that you could make. But now with the degrading of the security around the 10-year government bond, we're seeing a lot of changes happening. We're seeing changes where gold is now becoming the foundation of a crypto exchange. On the one end, in terms of the BRIC nations. On the other end, we're seeing America losing its ability to sell its government debt to other countries. And it dropped from about 33% to a little above 20%. So the Genius Act in America was quite interesting because there it allowed stable coins backed by the US dollar. But what they don't say is that these companies that provide these stable coins have to have as a backstop American government debt. So it means that if you have a devaluation of your currency 2, 3, 4, 5% per year, they can internationalize this to the world that would use stable coins, and all of them would then inherently buy American government debt that would replace governments that normally would buy the debt. Very interesting play. Let's go take a look at what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese are saying, we've got a cryptocurrency that we would like to utilize to replace the Bretton Woods payment ecosystem. And what would we do to replace SWIFT? Well, we can create a foundation of gold, and you can always then exchange your digital currency for gold. But it's no use if the gold sits in Hong Kong. So what they're doing right now is to open up multiple locations throughout the world where gold will then be held as a deposit, as a repository, and then they float a digital currency that can be used for interchange between countries, all backed by these assets that are distributed. And it looks like the countries are far more open to that because they are harking back to the gold standard. So it's very interesting to see how the world is shaping. New opportunities are emerging, and we don't know where these trends are heading, but we do know that by looking underneath the headlines, you're seeing fundamental trends which will shape our world in years ahead.
When was the last time that you had a truly thorough eye examination? One that felt personal, unhurried, and completely focused on your unique situation. With Elna Extian, a leading optometrist in Pretoria, that's exactly what you'll get. Elna offers a comprehensive, bespoke eye care experience tailored just for you. From advanced eye testing that starts with diagnosing nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, and presbyopia, and continuing with diagnosing subtle and acute visual discomfort such as headaches, scratchy, itchy, watery, burny, and red eyes. In addition, Elna does expert screening for more serious conditions such as glaucoma, cataracts, juvenile and age-related macular degeneration, retinal detachments, diabetic and thyroid eye disease. Elna will also guide you through selecting amongst the most suitable corrective spectacles and or contact lenses and the most stylish, high-quality eyewear that suits your face type, lifestyle and budget. And if attention is needed for something more, Elna will address certain conditions right in the practice or refer if needed. So, you're always in the best caring hands. Your eyes and visual health deserves more than a quick checklist. They deserve care that covers the holistic picture. See clearly. Stay healthy. Get problems diagnosed and addressed before it gets serious. Contact Elna today for an appointment or send an email. Priceless vision and timeless quality. Now, which current trends do you see are really colliding and making waves, and which we either have to take cognizance of or be scared of, or which creates opportunities, the best opportunities for businesses and societies and individuals?
The problem is that a weak signal can rattle the boat completely. So there are the fundamental trends which will shape our world, demographics linked to that, and because demographics is destiny, it will influence geopolitics. The absolute lack of personnel in Russia forced Russia to consider shortening their border by going through Ukraine to the Baltics, which is a direct result of the 2000 collapse in population numbers because of a sovereign debt default. So very interesting that the demography is a critical driver. If you understand that, you understand a tremendous amount and the implications on the world. Now we're seeing a reshaping of the global economic order, new economic regimes emerging, deglobalization, shorter supply chains. Over and above that, we have environmental change, and over and above that, we've got technological changes. So other than societal changes, we also have technological changes which might have a exponential impact on our world, very similar to the argument I had around scarcities and bandwidth. The problem is it doesn't change in these other domains as fast as in the world of technology. Technology is literally an exponential growth curve, and that has the biggest impact and the most uncertain impact on the world around us. So the impact of artificial intelligence, but we're going to see a change in the low Earth altitude economy, drones, delivery drones, passenger drones. The space economy will explode from meteorite mining, moon bases. So the space economy will open up. We are seeing changes in artificial intelligence that through pattern recognition mapped 200 million proteins, which means personalized medicine now becomes interesting. It means that in the next 10 years, they will have a digital twin of you as an individual. And then they will look at your DNA, your lifestyle habits, your medical history, and then decide which type of protocols to use on your digital twin. And then they'll say, all right, well, this is what the pattern recognition tells us. Let's try these drugs on you and see if it works. So we're seeing a shift in healthcare. where the hospital borders are now migrating to your home because of digital technology that you wear around your wrist. You can now literally expand the definition of a hospital beyond it. And we can move to value-based care, where in the past you go to a hospital and you pay for a service fee. Why don't you pay for it based on the value that you get and how healthy you remain? So huge changes we'll get, and the foundation behind it is artificial intelligence, which did pattern recognition on proteins. Now, for those of you that don't know, the 200 million proteins that were mapped by AlphaFold, they got the Nobel Prize of Chemistry for that in 2024. On the other end of the scale, we're seeing explosion in nanomaterials crystals, where stable crystals can now be mapped utilizing the pattern recognition of AI. And this means that in the next generation of motor vehicles, your batteries will be lighter, more efficient. You can have recharging coils in your cars, which is currently very heavy, but in the future might become very light. And this will change the structure of recharging within cities. We might see changes in cars driving themselves, the impact that'll have on autonomous driving, and the impact it'll have on pensioners, suddenly getting more freedom. I can go on and on and on. The challenge is that there are wonderful technologies that will unlock this ecosystem. We should not underestimate the world of the quantum, as well as quantum computing and quantum key distribution, the next era of cybersecurity. So all of these technology trends might have an impact on our world far quicker than we think. So whether these other trends play out over a 20, 30, 40-year period, and the opportunities within it opens up wonderful ideas to discuss, the technology will have a bigger impact because of its exponential nature. And by reshaping the world of abundances and scarcities, brand new opportunities will emerge.
Now, the question is, my digital twin, will that be sentient and conscious?
No, well, this is a difficult one. It's a long debate, and I'm not by no stretch of the imagination an expert on artificial intelligence in terms of how it operates, but from a philosophical perspective, there's a couple of challenges. Remember that a computer system will have to work on a digital core focusing on mathematical constructs in order to understand the different fields. So let me give you an example why I think LLMs or large language models might not be the path to sentient AI. Here's reality. Then we as humans, we perceive reality through limited senses. We can only see some frequencies and hear some frequencies. So we've got a limited understanding of the true reality out there. Secondly, our brain has been optimized for survival, not for pattern recognition. And I can give you example upon example upon example where humans don't truly see the patterns as they are, but based on how our brain understands it, based on our evolutionary past. And then, based on this imperfect understanding of an imperfect signal that we get from reality, we then create language in order to convey our understanding of this world to other people, which I'm trying my best to do, utilizing my current knowledge of a language. And then we have a computer system that works on bits and bytes that are building a mathematical model in order to understand language. So your reality between an AI entity and reality is 3-4 steps removed. And the error factor of faults in each one of them create huge challenges. So I don't think LLMs will lead us to a conscious AI. That doesn't mean that there isn't emergent consciousness. We need to take a look at other intelligences in our universe as well. You know, bees interacting with each other, and then you have an emergence of intelligence. Termite mounds and anthills that have no centralized command and control, but have an emergence of intelligence. These are some of the foundations where we get emergent intelligence from, and we should not negate that. There's very interesting debates around how that can impact our world. But the current models we use, I don't think will be sufficient enough to take us to a more advanced state of AI. Very interesting, LeCun, the chief data scientist at Meta, he's got a different approach, so he's breaking away from the pack and doing wonderful research. I think it's a very interesting pathway to follow. I don't know where it's going to end up, but these are some of the underlying trends we need to pick up on and to get a better idea of where the future will take us.
Well, that's very interesting, but currently we have AI and large language models and so on, and you know, we use the programs, but how do they actually, if I ask them a question that they've never heard before, how do they actually manage to give me an answer that makes sense?
So your question is they never heard before, and I think that's where the problem sits. AI cannot extrapolate. It can only interpolate. So if you haven't specifically trained an AI model on the relationship between two constructs, it wouldn't know how to relate them to each other. But the large language model has been built on a world body of knowledge. It ingested every single book, every single encyclopedia, every single article. So the question is, have they heard of it before? By most means it has. But is it truly unique? No, because it can only interpolate. So I think the question then comes in, how does a multi-dimensional model, it uses at a foundational level vectors. So if you look at a large language model, it utilizes tokens, where it gives token to numbers and every single character you get under the sun in different languages. And these tokens, through embedding, where we train it with a variety of sources, would then reposition itself in a multi-dimensional matrix. We, as humans, we understand 3 dimensions. A multi-dimensional matrix can have 20,000 odd dimensions. You know, that's the level of dimensions. So that means they position certain tokens in relationship to each other, and between it, vectors emerge. A vector is an arrow with a distance, and that means it can then try to, from a vector perspective, get the difference between man and woman. But then you can project that into a different domain, a royalty domain, it becomes king and queen, or a family domain, or a parental vector, which gives you father and mother. So that means that the LLM can predict these patterns. And when we then give it a pattern, it will look elsewhere in the database to then complete the pattern that it has been trained on. So a computer isn't sitting there thinking about deeper the implications of life. It just sits there waiting for tokens to arrive. And as the tokens arrives, it looks at the relationship of these tokens with other tokens and then gives you these tokens back. We read these tokens as words, or we see it as pictures, but that's literally what AI does, the large language model. It's not an intelligence. It's this unbelievable pattern recognition and pattern matching system that we're experiencing, and we are calling it intelligence.
Okay, so you said we are actually pattern recognizers ourselves in order to survive, but we are not very good at it.
No, we're not.
And large language models and AI, just because of the computing power, they can...
And data.
And data.
And the amount of data.
So they can do better than, that's why it seems so absolutely fascinating what they can do.
So the pattern recognition capability of AI is by far better than what humans can do. But it has no understanding of logic in the way we do. There's a brilliant example on the internet about a Tesla driving on the middle of a highway in the middle of nowhere. And it suddenly sees traffic lights appearing out of nowhere, zooming past it. And there's a truck in front with traffic lights on the highway appearing out of nowhere. And when you look at the truck, it has traffic lights on its back and the truck is driving, and I hope we can show the video. But if I ask you, have you ever seen in your life a truck delivering traffic lights? And I've been on this planet for about 55 odd years. I've never seen a truck. I can't recall because it's not important in my mindset. But the moment I see a truck with traffic lights on the back, I'll immediately understand what it is. I don't have to be trained on the relationship between the two to understand it from a grounded perspective. From an AI perspective, it doesn't know what to do. It's never been trained on the relationship between the two. But now, once it has been trained on the relationship, it won't make the mistake again. And this is why I believe Tesla will win the self-driving game, purely because of the amount of data that it ingests. Hundreds of thousands of cars, recording everything in minute detail, and that creates then a far better model that will anticipate the very weird things that might happen in an ecosystem where people drive cars. So very interesting, but the point remains that in the current context, AI cannot extrapolate, it can only interpolate.
Now, in terms of people thinking they are going to lose their jobs because of AI and interpolation and extrapolation, who of us are going to survive our jobs?
I think we need to adapt as humans. With all technology, we adapt. Look at how technology changed our entire evolutionary history. The fact that we used fire to turn meat into things that we could burn, eat, that changed how we as humans interact with each other. Technology has been part of our evolution forever. And to think that AI will not play a role in our evolution as a species, it's a mistaken thought. Let's go back to what it will replace. AI is very good at finishing 80% of the job you want to do, but you need your expertise and your insight as an individual to finish the other 20. So I can say, here is a prompt, I want a business case to be written with a business model canvas, and it will do so, but I will then use 20% of my additional time to fill in the details that it missed. And it's that critical level of thinking that is critical, not to think that a stock standard generic answer is the answer, but something that's different and unique and stands out, cutting through the amount of noise. And I think that's where humans will play a significant role, is by minutely looking at the world and understanding what is important and what is not, the signal to noise ratio, because AI will generate a tremendous amount of noise. And the individuals that can cut through the noise and look at the signal will be those that will prosper in years ahead.
So it seems that you actually need very, very competent and well-trained people to utilize the power of AI. So it is not making education obsolete. It actually says education must become even more rigorous. Correct. In order to be able to use AI.
So repetitive things can be done by AI, but the really deep thought, the deeper understanding of the world around us, looking at patterns that unlock, that the AI doesn't even pick up, based on what we as humans do in our day-to-day interactions, having a deeper understanding of reality, and again, filtering the noise from the signal. I think that becomes really, really important, because you can use AI for a tremendous amount of jobs, from computer programming, but it will never replace the logical evaluation ability or the rigorous assessment of reality. And AI still has a bit of work to do to start competing with that.
So people who are actually thinking AI is making us dumber, a lot of people are becoming dumber because they think, I don't have to learn, I can just look it up. It's in the old days, I think in computers about 3 days ago, they talked about the Google effect. That if the Google effect is if you think it's, I can look it up, I don't need to memorize it. But so a lot of people are going down that way. But the people who are going to benefit are those who actually learn and become experts in their field, and they will prosper.
We can dig down a very deep philosophical hole, but if you look at the work of all the philosophers, that they worried about the fact that we don't put in the effort that our previous generations did in our far more comfortable world. Immediate gratification, the fact that I can relax and I don't have to work as hard in order to live a prosperous life, and I don't need to stretch myself or go through a period of difficulty. And learning is that. It's not sitting back and watching YouTube videos. It's taking a commitment to deepen your understanding of a specific field. And AI can play a wonderful role there by saying, explain it to me in a different way. But it takes the effort of sitting down and learning, which pushes the boundaries of comfort. It's a period of discomfort that you need to go into in order to unlock new insights. And I'm a bit worried that we are getting far more laid back in our approach, and we are thinking that AI will replace everything and do everything, and we don't need to push the boundaries of our own intellectual journey. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we'll see in the future.
Now let's just dig a little bit deeper in AI and education. So which part of the learning process, which correctly you said it must be effortful. If it's not effortful, it's not effective. And you are not actually learning because you want to change your brain. Your brain is only being changed when you are being challenged and when you are making mistakes and all those kind of stuff. So in terms of this, what is the role, the proper, productive, good role that AI can play in education, and how does we have to harness that in schools and in universities and lifelong learning as well?
I think one of the beautiful things about AI, it's its ability to personalize learning material. It can look at you as an individual with a unique personality. Sometimes you learn better through images or words or stories or facts, and it can reshape a very boring, unidirectional learning model, and it can convert it into something that more mimics your unique learning style. And I think that's where AI can play a fundamental role in making difficult concepts far more digestible and giving it in different ways, in terms of a learning methodology, but also in terms of difficulty levels and how it can build it up. So I think there's wonderful opportunities where AI can reshape the learning journey, but the challenge still remains. It must be effortful, if I can copy your word.
Yeah, well, you see, Vygotsky many years ago said you have to meet the student where he or she is, and in a class with 33 or 45 students, that's extremely impossible. But now, if you teach learners how to utilize and use AI to personalize it, then it becomes an absolute possibility to do that. And it seems to me the one thing that AI makes easier in terms of learning is your basic data gathering. So instead of you have to look for lots and lots of information, it gives you the information. And so you can actually start off a little bit further in the process of learning, and then go the effortful way.
And platforms like Notebook LM and its similar products on other platforms, wonderful opportunity where you have your very own notebook, your own collection of different data sets, and it could be multimodal. You can all incorporate it and then ask important questions around it, and also then learn from it in different ways. So wonderful things are happening with multimodal AI and how it then impacts the world of learning.
And it seems to me the AI programs are catching up onto this, because if, say for instance with chat, you can go to a learning mode. It doesn't give you answers, it gives you in a way that stimulates the learning process. Now, so it is changing education, and it's going, and I don't think we even have the faintest idea how significantly it's going to change education. How is it changing business?
Well, it's a difficult one. There are challenges we have around large language models, and we don't have a solution for it yet, but with human ingenuity, I think it will come. One of the challenges we have right now with agentic AI is if I tell an AI agent...
What is agentic AI?
Agentic AI is where we create an agent like a babysitter. We give them specific tasks to do, and we want them to do a task to alleviate the effort on our side. I now need to book a trip to the Middle East or to Paris, and I want a specific flight that fits my needs and a place to stay and that would adhere it. And these would normally be a search that I would do, but with an agentic AI, I can give it certain parameters and it will then fit my unique needs. Agentic AI can also make telephone calls and book certain things for me and understand it from a visual perspective. The challenge we have with agentic AI is this. It all works on tokens. We spoke about that. Where computer systems work on instructions and data, large language models works on tokens. The problem we have with that is that for this agent to really do its job well, I need to give it access to a variety of information resources. I need to give it access to my calendar. I can't say, book a nice four-star hotel for me in Paris. But there's a Paris in the USA as well, so hopefully it doesn't link to that one and then book a flight to Paris in the USA. I want Paris in France. But that means I need to give it access to my calendar. I need to give it access to my email, to my information resources and login. I need to give it a payment capability. And what the agent can then do is then to ingest, think of it as an agent with a purpose. We give the agent a input, ears and eyes, so we need to give it an input. Then we need to give it a brain and memory so that it understands what it does and a memory around what is the specific requirements we want it to do. And then we need to give it an output, hands, and you have a brain cell, a brain stem that links all of it together. So that's kind of what an agent does. But the problem is that by giving it access to external resources, you're also opening up your corporate environment to cyber attack. Why? Because of tokens. I can ingest a PDF document with tokens embedded in it. And in some cases, those tokens can be understood on my computer as an instruction to then, I can now infect a computer via a PDF, via these tokens. And because I've given it access to all of these resources, it can gather those resources and then transmit it elsewhere. And that's called the AI trifecta. We give it access to external inputs, we give it access to external transmission, and we give it access to private data. And because the LLM is a token-based ecosystem and not instructions and data, there is a flaw. And we're seeing a number of companies trying to negate that. But the AI game isn't won yet. Agentic AI is very much still in the early stages of technology development, and there is a question around its security. And once those things are negated or in a way made more secure, I think that adoption of it will definitely increase in the corporate environment.
Now, apart from that, because I think what you are saying is actually we will have to be very careful in prompting, in how we speak to AI to ask questions, because you have to be very specific, as you said about Paris, and there's also Pretoria in the USA. So you have to speak to it as if it is almost dumb, so that you have to be very specific in what you ask. But if I've got a business now, in terms of AI, what are the future of, how should I kind of future-proof my business so that I'm not being, taken over or passed by other businesses who knows it better? Once again, it's AI and future.
Different careers and different companies will harness AI in different ways. Let me explain. If you're a computer programmer, you can triple your productivity because you know what to do, you know the architecture, but you can use the AI to write the computer code for you at an unbelievably fast pace. So that means that the ability to roll out or specific computer programs for specific purposes will explode. In the past, we didn't want to go on a software project because it took you 20 personnel and took $20 million and took 2 years to accomplish. Now AI can do that in a matter of weeks with far less people. So we're seeing a group of individuals that become far more productive. The question is, will that same increase in productivity roll over to the rest of the environment? Most people use it for document management, email management, and we have to be careful here because sometimes when you get an email that is well structured by AI, people ignore it because they really want your input. Authenticity becomes really important. But will that same increase in productivity roll out to other domains? Yes and no. If you're a small company, unbelievable opportunities because now you can run an entire social media campaign, you can create your own videos, you can create your own images, and you can roll this out at a far lower cost than what was possible in the past. Large organizations will be a bit more careful in harnessing these tools. They're more stuck to their ways. They don't want anyone to create an AI-driven advertisement. They'd rather use the ad agency to do so. And the impact on it will be delayed over time. But different strata in your business environment will be impacted in different ways. I believe that your small businesses, by using these AI tools, can super boost their performance. In large organizations, there will be limitations on the use of it because of information sensitivity. And we're seeing a number of restrictions in big corporates around the use of AI tools due to the fact that it's a question around cybersecurity. So is the promise there to unlock huge productivity within the business sector? Yes, the promise is there. But it's not going to play out in that way because of certain constraints that is baked into the pie.
Well, is that what you mean by digital adoption, digital transformation, and digital disruptions as levels of ambition? Where does that come into?
So our AI masterclass that we rolled out, we actually did on the first two. We actually said, well, what is the first one? You can use AI tools to increase your personal productivity. I'll give you an example. If you use access control at a gate for passport control, utilizing AI to do image recognition and pattern recognition to give quicker access to passport control, that's seen as adoption. Digital transformation would be, you don't have to go to a bank in order to open up a bank account. You use your phone, you take a picture of your ID card, you shake your head, and suddenly your bank account is open. That is transformation, where the entire value chain can be transformed and optimized. But digital disruption is where you fundamentally change. You liquefy the elements in your value chain so they can be bundled, unbundled, and rebundled, and then creating high density. I'll give you an example. I can use this device to monitor my heart rate. And if I have a certain heart ailment, I will register at a specific hospital that will check this remotely. Based on historical data, they can say, oh, people that had similar heart problems like you showed the following heart rate and blood oxygen changes, and there's an 80% chance of you getting a heart attack in the next hour. They will then send an ambulance to you to pick you up before you get the heart attack. And they either inject you to stop you getting it, or if you do get the heart attack, you're in the best possible hands if it happens. You see, everything now changes. The time, the place, the actors, and the constellation all change. The business model changes as well. Because in the past, if you were at a heart hospital, how do you make money? You sit back and wait for someone to get a heart attack. What's the new approach? The new approach is, no. I'm going to stop you getting a heart attack. I'm going to be proactive in managing your health, and I'm going to charge you a monthly fee so you live longer. And the longer you live, the more money I make. Value-based care, right? So instead of paying a fee for a service, we now bundle it around a value-based care system. And this is what is meant by digital disruption.
And value fabric, where does that come in?
So the value fabric is, forget about a value chain. A value chain was distinct steps that you then take in order to get to a specific objective. And we always taught people that you've got an input and an output in each place, and there's the 5 forces Porter model where you move back and forth in the value chain and new disruptions coming in. The value fabric means that you've got this entire new ecosystem around it, from hyperconnectivity to IoT to AI decision-making capability, that all has an impact on the entire ecosystem. So the value fabric is far more than a value chain in a unidimensional way. You now need to look at it from a multidimensional perspective and ask yourself, in an environment where intelligence can now become abundant in terms of pattern recognition, how can we then change certain processes that goes beyond just the confines of our business focus or our value chain? So it literally means changing the elements in your value chain by utilizing this information fabric and creating a far more efficient way of doing business.
So we've talked about education and business and healthcare. Which other kind of major changes do you see are imminent?
We mentioned a whole bunch of trends, but I think the important thing we need to realize is a bigger focus on how to manage this change. And that's why I believe that individuals and organizations should pay more attention to complex adaptive systems. You see, how many variants of the COVID virus were there? I believe about 100,000. But 99.9% of them died out because they were not different, not sufficiently stronger than the virus that they mutated from. Now remember, evolution is not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the luckiest. You have a certain DNA in your virus, then there's a mutation. Is this mutation better adapted at harnessing the resources around it or not than the virus it mutated from? If not, it'll die out. If it is better, it creates a new strain. The moment there's a change in the agent, it changes the environment. Now there's a new strain, so the environment changes the agent, and the agent changes the environment. We call this a dynamic fitness landscape. You don't get that in the world of physics. In the world of physics, we've got rules and regulations that clearly state these are the rules of physics, Newtonian physics. They're predictable, they're repeatable. In a world of change, we are entering an era of a rapidly changing dynamic fitness landscape. Our ability to harness the opportunities in that landscape is now linked to a different mindset. You need to create an attractor, but you can't predict the attractor because whatever actions you take into a complex system, you can't predict the outcome of it. So this is now a whole mindset of probing, sensing, and responding. I'm going back to the Cynefin framework. So you probe, you see what impact your probe has on the market, and based on the probe, you then build additional probes. If I say I move into a new market, I want people to increase their saving. I don't know what to do, so I probe the market in different ways, see how the market reacts, and on that, I build further reactions. So it's a way in which you interact with a live dynamic environment with a hope, from a technology perspective, to create an attractor. An attractor is, for example, people's use of a specific technology. It's Chrome or the new what chat engines are available, or what speaker standards we have, or the operating system on our devices. These are the new technology standards. But if you look back in history, you see that they came from an era of huge competition. There were 10, 20 companies all competing for dominance, and then over time, one of them becomes dominant. And the question is, what strategy do you follow to get that dominant domain to emerge? For that, you need insights into complex adaptive systems. Let's go look at anthropology, virology, evolutionary biology to give us a different vocabulary in order to then impact the world around us. And I believe that's one of the key things we're missing currently in our current structure. All of these changes around us, we can't predict the future, but we can learn how to influence it, not knowing that we will have a more predictive outcome, but have a higher chance of success by understanding the underlying ontologies that would define future developments in technology and in the rest of society.
So that's almost, you must get into a flight simulator or a life simulator, which helps you to kind of predict things before they happen.
So what's fascinating is that it's a controversial company by no stretch of the imagination, a company called Palantir. And they are very clever because they use different ontologies to map the relationship between agents in the network. Some of these relationships are static, some of them are dynamic, some of them are complex. And in the past, we always thought that by preparing an organization for the future will give them a competitive advantage, which puts my job under stress, because that's what we do. We take organizations into domain and say, you need to anticipate the future. What should you do? What will be the major trends and what should you be ready for? What companies like Palantir is doing is to say, I'm busy building an entire digital twin, not of a construct, but of an entire company. And then by looking at anything that impacts your company, they immediately know how to react to it. And this was born out of the battlefield. So Palantir came out of multiple sources that you use in a battlefield environment. Then something happens on a battlefield, and then it immediately tells you that's how you react in order to harness opportunities. Looking at the gaps in the system, looking at the weak signals, testing new things and seeing what works. Far more dynamic, far more agile than your traditional command and control system. So the software, in a sense, tells you, I've built a digital twin of your entire organization. We've mapped various unknown inputs, but the moment the input happens, we can react very quickly. Now your competitive advantage isn't in preparing for the future. Your competitive advantage is how quickly do you react when something happens? And that's going to be one of the key differentiators in the next 10 years. How quickly do companies react when there's a change that has an impact on the income streams, revenue models, or strategy?
Before we continue, let me tell you about a journal that's rethinking what academic publishing can be. The Journal of Exotechnology and Education, or JEXT in short, isn't your typical academic journal. This open access, peer-reviewed publication welcomes not just traditional articles, but also videos, games, podcasts, apps, animations, and even works in progress. If you are researching cutting-edge technology in education and want to show your work in motion rather than just describe it, this is your platform. And here's the best part. While we are awaiting accreditation, there are no page fees. All content is freely available under Creative Commons licensing, so your research reaches everyone who needs it. Ready to publish something truly innovative? Email Erna at olivee@unisa.ac.za. That is olivee@unisa.ac.za, or visit their website to learn more. And that's JEXT, where educational technology research breaks free from static pages. Okay, let's do a thought experiment. It's now 2065, 40 years from now on. So how do you see the world? Let's talk about, let's begin with space exploration. What's going to happen there?
If you take a look at how unbelievably mineral rich some of these asteroids are, we do see a reality where you can put an asteroid in orbit around the Earth and then mine it with things like the Starship. A more radical approach would be to bring it into atmosphere and have it break up and crash somewhere if it's a smaller meteorite. And we wrote an interesting article about that where I think it's University of Kansas that has an idea to crash it in Kazakhstan because of its low density of people and then mine it there. But if something goes wrong with that descent and it falls into another geography, so we wrote one of those ridiculous headlines from the future, and we wrote that it crashed off the coast of Mauritius. Now the question becomes, who does it belong to? Does it belong to the agency that brought it in to mine it, or does it now belong to the local territory where it crashed? Very, very interesting legal debates around where this might go. But by 2065, we do believe that space mining will become a reality and that we will be harnessing scarce materials on asteroids. Rather than digging deeper down the crust of the planet, we might be able to find them circling around on rocks in our local space neighborhood. We will also see moon mining. Helium-3 will be very, very important. It's very interesting. Can you guess what's the current rate or price for 1 kilogram of helium-3?
No idea.
$20 million, 1 kilogram. And this is a critical material that we will use in nuclear fusion. So in the early phases of testing and development now with ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor in the south of France, we need helium-3 because one helium-3 particle and one deuterium can give us very high energy output. And this is very important in our early phases of testing nuclear fusion. So helium-3 will be a critical resource. The Chinese have already mapped helium-3 deposits as way back as 2014 with the Chang'e 3 mission. And the entire race to the moon is racing to the helium-3 deposits, which is seen by some as a key to unlocking nuclear fusion. If we can get nuclear fusion to work at scale, this will redefine humanity. Imagine a humanity where energy is in abundance, where we take a step onto the journey of becoming a level 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. So now we are currently harnessing finite resources on our planet, and we will use them up at some point in time in the future. But by harnessing nuclear fusion and by harnessing the energy of the sun more effectively, we can then become a civilization that has energy in abundance. Suddenly, a lot of things change. We wouldn't have water scarcity anymore. Because if you have abundance of energy, you can turn any water into potable water. We are seeing, imagine a world where small little reactors are put close to cities, even large towns, and that provides energy. When you have an abundance of energy, that will change agriculture, it'll change manufacturing. So a world of abundant energy is a distant vision, but by 2065, we might be a few steps closer. So in the same way that you have an abundance of bandwidth on your fiber, you don't pay per megabyte for your fiber, which you did in the past, you simply pay for access. And that will change as well, where you as an individual will pay for access to the energy, but not the amount you use.
Well, it seems to me music is also going to be impacted because the song will not be Man on the Moon, but Mine on the Moon.
It could be, it could most definitely be that.
What about longevity?
Huge changes. If we look at what happened over the last couple of years, better nutrition, better understanding, people moving from sick care to healthcare, we're seeing that people live longer. And now we're deeper insights into, they call it health span. No longer lifespan, but health span. How healthy are you as you get older? And huge insights is now emerging all around us that tells us what we need to do, from building muscle as we age, and what are the type of nutrients that you need, how do you sleep better at night. All of this plays a role in creating better healthcare for all of us. And then the development of new materials will help as well, the redefinition of what healthcare looks like, and then the research done in the microbiome space and the DNA space, and our ability to create proteins. That will unlock huge opportunities to battle some of the diseases we get as we age.
Well, something that is impacting on our lifespan as well is security and wars and so on. What is going on in that field?
That's a never-ending evolving game. We see where drones redefined the battle landscape in Ukraine. What we're seeing from a personal productivity perspective is the increased use of AI. So let me give you an example. What do you call this device, by the way?
Well, most probably it's a phone, a mobile phone.
That's the wrong word for it. It truly is. Because if you go and look at the battery utilization on my device, and I would advise you to do the same. So I can go and take a look at the battery use of this device, this so-called smartphone. I hate doing that. I call it the Inco Puko Suko, the internet-connected portable supercomputer. Yes, because look at what I'm using this device for. I have, hey, look at that, The Economist magazine, number 1 on my list. And then secondly, my assistant, which I ask it to give me the latest updates on news. Then I've got social media, WhatsApp, Gmail, my home lock screen, social media, Spotify, personal hotspot, social media. Number 11 on my list with a usage of 2% is phone. So I now have the phone application as number 9 or 10 on my list. In most cases, people have it at number 30. There's no reason to call this a phone anymore. If I use this logic, I can just as well call my car a cigarette light on wheels or a music room on wheels. It doesn't make sense. So we need to give the technology we use the correct name in order to understand what it does. We can download an algorithm that has been defined or refined by AI on our device, and that changes everything from the moment I look at it and it uses my face to unlock, to going to my photo albums and saying, show me all the dogs, and automatically it'll appear. That is a product of artificial intelligence, algorithm at the edge. From a security perspective, we're already seeing that permeating around us. There's a wonderful device called the Ubiquiti AI Key. It's a device that you plug in on your existing security cameras, and then it has a small language model wrapped around it. So narrow AI for face recognition, number plate recognition, car recognition. And then you have a small language model wrapped around it, and then you type in, show me all the delivery persons that walked up to my door, and you get an image of it. The moment you see a face that you haven't seen before, immediately create an alert. Here are 3 people that are lurking around and they are passing your house for the 3rd time. We've never seen them before. Create an alert. So your pattern recognition capability is now built into the device. And you don't pay a license fee for it. It's built into the device cost. So our ability to pick up patterns in the world around us now becomes far easier. I'll give you another example. You have certain websites where you can download apps for your smart camera. Now let's, for example, say you're at an airport and you want to immediately tag someone when they leave a bag behind. So when they walk around and they leave a bag behind, you tag them. But this person might go to the bathroom or might go grab a cup of coffee. So a secondary application will take over where the person is walking to. And if that person leaves that facility, immediately trigger alarm, immediately send his picture to all the security guards and ask them to apprehend the person, and then send an evacuation report. So you can create certain rules and regulations based on the pattern recognition of your cameras. So we are seeing an explosion in smart camera usage where these AI algorithms or AI trained algorithms is unlocking a far deeper insight on security. Because with security there's a 1% chance of it happening, and most people get bored by looking at their day-to-day rates. They don't look at the deviations. AI is brilliant at pattern recognition, and I think there's a huge market that can be unlocked in that regard.
What about transportation? Are we still going to have cars, or are we going to be Jetsons?
Well, self-driving cars is going to change our world, self-driving cars and humanoids, but we'll get to that momentarily. What I do think an interesting impact of it would be robo-taxis that fly. So companies like eHang, Joby, and Archer is at the point of launching commercial services. It's already available in China for the last year as we speak, where you can take your phone, order a drone, lands on your roof, you climb in, and 5 minutes later you're somewhere else in the city. In your large developing cities, we're talking about Bangalore, Delhi, Sao Paulo, you get stuck in traffic for 3-4 hours. Imagine you climb off an aircraft, you walk up to a drone, and 5 minutes later you're at your location. So we are seeing a number of cities opening up the low altitude economy. It's not like everyone is going to have a robo-taxi to fly in. It just means that the number of trips will be more. They are very quiet. They're literally a little bit louder than our current conversation right now. And the operating cost is a quarter of that of a helicopter. So we're seeing an explosion in these verticopters and vertiports. And these cities make a huge amount of money from it, because every time a business class or first class passenger lands at a specific vertiport, you charge them a few dollars, and wonderful income for the city. And it also then alleviates traffic for, well, not for everyone, but it means that there is a change in patterns and that you are more efficient for the utilization of time in these developing cities. So that's happening. We are seeing wonderful opportunities in delivery of critical components or critical goods. We've seen in Rwanda between the years 2015 and 2025 that they made more than 1 million deliveries of critical blood supplies and pharmaceuticals to outlying hospitals. They've got a company called Zipline, is using drones that speed up a drone to about 100 kilometers an hour after a quarter second of launch. It then flies over the hospital as the doctor would have placed an order and said, listen, I want this blood critical, go. Within 10 minutes or 15 minutes, anywhere in Rwanda, the drone comes over, throws out a parachute and goes to land again. And it's turned around in 30 seconds, ready to launch again. And they've made more than 1 million deliveries of critical blood supply and pharmaceuticals to outlying hospitals. So we are seeing drones playing a very interesting role. In China, you can already order a cup of coffee, and then they've got a specific vending machine where this drone then lands, drops off the cup of coffee, and you take it out of the vending machine. In the USA, they're experimenting with drones that stay in the air with a cable lowering the product and then taking it back up again. Where that will go, that depends on regulation and adoption by people. The technology exists, but the adoption by the ecosystem isn't a set reality yet. So wonderful opportunities in the low economy ecosystem. We're seeing drones staying stationary over an area for about a month or two. The Airbus Zepard is doing that already. So you can have one hovering around a city, and it then takes a picture every millisecond, and you can literally track cars where they came from and go to on a big picture scale with zoom cameras that can zoom in on any area. So immediate emergency response needed, or an accident, or a fire breaking out. So from a security perspective, imagine walking on Table Mountain and you've got this eye in the sky. And the moment it tracks all the movements of everyone, and the moment something weird happens, you can track where that person came from and where they're going. So security is going to play a significant role by merging the low altitude economy with the current capability of cameras and linking that to artificial intelligence.
And Optimus robots everyone will have 4 in their homes, or what's going to happen?
The current estimate is that a humanoid robot will go for about $20,000. We anticipate them to become mainstream by 2030, 2035. And very interesting things are happening in that space. I think we're underestimating the impact of humanoid robots in our lives. And it will become a far bigger role, or play a far bigger role in subsequent years than what it is today in 2025.
Well, what about relationships? Are we going to go into relationships with AI or with robots, or with what's going to happen in between people?
I normally steer away from making any prediction about humans because they are so unpredictable. I think we will move into a space of authenticity. That will become very important. We will have guidance from AI systems that can help us, from financial advice to even emotional support. So that's going to change as well. But I'm going to be very careful in making predictions because of there's an essence, inherent unpredictability in how humans react to certain things. We can make certain generalizations, but in that domain, I'd rather like to keep my thoughts to myself because I might be completely off track.
Well, I think the last question that I would like to ask is, this is really complex. It's fascinating, but it's so complex. And, large companies can spend a lot of money to come to terms with all these trends and technologies and so on. But, me as an individual, or the people living next door to me, what do we have to do? How can we firstly become knowledgeable about this, and how can I prepare for the future?
So firstly, let's take a look at some of the longer term trends that play out slower and that has got predictable trajectories. Demographics, economic regimes, geopolitics. To an extent we can lay out certain scenarios where that ends up. The key problem we're facing with is technology. It's not the advance of technology, but which technologies gets adopted and standardized. For years we've been talking about smart glasses, and it hasn't really materialized to the extent that we predicted. Or VR glasses, wonderful impact for niche markets, but it hasn't gone really mainstream. So it's very difficult to make a prediction on a technology that is open to proprietary control. We call that the guerrilla game, by the way. This is where one company controls the de facto standard within a specific technology. Another approach is to take a look at standardized technologies that are standardized by international bodies that we know will enter the market. So from a company perspective, there is challenges around what will become a reality. From a technology adoption perspective, it's one of the critical things we need to ask ourselves and do further research on. But let me give you an example. The 6G standard will enter the space where your radio waves will now be communication waves and radar waves all embedded in one. So remote sensing means that I can put an antenna up, and let's say there's a shift in a bridge by 1 centimeter. The radio systems will pick it up. Let's say there's drones flying that is unauthorized. You can pick up where they came from and where they are. So suddenly the remote sensing capability becomes different. It also means that we have to be more careful in terms of our internet security. And this is where your 6G standard with quantum key distribution can play a significant role. So for organizations, they can rely and depend on standardized technologies, and therefore any contingency plans they have based on that reality is more on a sure footing. But because everyone knows it, there's no real competitive advantage in it unless you're a first mover and you get market share. The second approach is to understand that this absolutely exponential growth in technological capabilities can unlock wonderful opportunities, and by using a low-risk adoption approach, multiple probes to see what works, you can harness these technologies to get a competitive advantage. But this means that your approach to a one-size-fits-all massive investment and high-risk model should be very carefully considered. That only works in a stable environment. In a flexible environment, we need to experiment. So a mindset of not worrying about making mistakes, not worrying about testing something, but having multiple safe-to-fail initiatives. And if 2 out of the 10 works well, that will be worth its weight in gold. So we really need to understand that our approach to business should be more about experimentation, literally cutting through the noise and looking at the signal, but also harnessing the true power of humans, our own ingenuity, our own capability of understanding the world as it is, extrapolating and creating new ideas. So there is no unique single answer. What we need to realize is we have to adapt with the times. If we don't adapt, we will be left behind. Different nations will develop at separate rates, but if we negate the technological changes and we ignore them, we will even fall further behind in terms of the purchasing power of the economy, in terms of the job prospects that will emerge in this new economy. And therefore, embracing new technologies, new ideas, new ways of thinking is a critical component of a prospering society.
So it seems in any case, I can't just go on living as if nothing has happened. I must actually become really, really informed about what's going on. And in that sense, AI can help you, at least to help you to gather more data than just, I don't like that person, to base all my decisions on. And so.
We live in a constantly changing world, and age isn't a factor. I'm 55 years old. You might be slightly younger than I am, but we'll leave that one there. But the fact is that you never stop learning, and that it also changes your ingrained thinking patterns. Open yourself up to different ways of thinking. And I think that's the biggest challenge. Not only lifelong learning, but also a lifelong questioning of how you understand reality, and if there's other opportunities to unlock deeper insights into the world around us. Understanding the world that is changing. So based on what we spoke about today, understanding the major megatrends, understanding exponential growth in technologies, and understanding complexity, those become, in my personal opinion, very important drivers for my life. But for someone else, it might be something else. So go and find your own niche. Go and find out what truly triggers your interest. It doesn't come easy. It comes through sacrifice and hard work, but the reward is so much more. And if information is your oxygen, wonderful new ideas can emerge, and we can also take society with us, because when we explore new opportunities, we explore more efficient ways of doing things, and we can unlock huge growth for not only ourselves, our families, our corporations, but also our countries.
Peter, this was actually not fascinating, this was spine tingling. And all the research that you are doing is really getting out of the ivory tower, making a real world impact, and we thank you for that, and thank you for helping us. And what I found and learned about today is that the future isn't what it used to be. Until next time. If you are involved in research that you would like to share with the rest of the world, please contact us on Knowledge Hub at blue-marble.co.za.